Well, another blow to a region near the Canada-U.S. border. Windsor is already on tenterhooks with the auto industry and Donald Trump's tariff crosshairs. Now, the plant in nearby Amherstburg that bottles Crown Royal, an iconic Canadian whiskey with a storied history, is closing and shifting work to south of the border. CTV's Adrian Gobriel now with the job losses and the heart-wrenching effect on a community. Adrian.
Yeah, Sandy, that Crown Royal bottling facility you mentioned near the Detroit-Windsor border in Amherstburg, Ontario, is that community's largest employer. And some are pointing towards the Trump trade war as a motive for the move.
We need to maintain the jobs. Without the jobs, we become a bedroom community, and I, as mayor, do not want that. We're trying to increase our commercial industrial base. We've been very successful in the last year. This is a major blow.
Canada has just experienced a shock. A major bottling plant in Amherstburg, Ontario, will soon close its doors. About 200 jobs are now at risk, and operations that once fueled Ontario's economy will be shifted across the border to the United States. For the town of Amherstburg, this plant wasn't just a workplace, it was a cornerstone of the local economy, a source of stability for families, and a hub that supported countless small businesses. This announcement comes at a tense moment for Canada's economy. Rising U.S. tariffs and weak federal protections for domestic manufacturing have already squeezed Canadian jobs, while Diageo, the global company behind the move, insists this decision is about supply chain efficiency. Critics see a deeper pattern. Canadian companies are increasingly shifting critical operations south. The question isn't just about one plant closing, it's about the bigger picture. Who is protecting Canadian workers when major employers can simply relocate? And where does Mark Carney, once viewed as a guardian of economic stability, stand as Canadian jobs slip away to American soil? For decades, the Amherstburg bottling plant quietly kept Crown Royal flowing to markets in both Canada and the U.S. Now, Diageo has confirmed the site will be shut down. Bottling for the U.S. will head across the border, while Canadian market production shifts to Valleyfield, Quebec. For the 200 workers in Amherstburg, the news hits hard. Years of experience, careers, and daily routines built around this plant are suddenly in jeopardy. The company says this is about efficiency and strengthening its North American supply chain. On paper, it makes sense for them, but on the ground, Canadian workers and communities feel disposable. Amherstburg is losing the core of its workforce, and the timing couldn't be worse. U.S. tariffs are already straining Canada's economy, while Ottawa's response has been slow. Meanwhile, American policies are making cross-border operations increasingly attractive to companies like Diageo. For Canadian workers in towns like Amherstburg, the reality is clear. The jobs are leaving, and federal leadership isn't stepping in fast enough to stop it. For the community, this plant was more than just a job site. It was part of the rhythm of daily life, supporting families, local shops, and small businesses. With closure looming, that rhythm is breaking. Cafes that once filled with plant workers at lunch are already seeing fewer customers. Gas stations, delivery services, and nearby stores are bracing for the downturn. Even ordinary routines, school drop-offs, carpools, grocery runs, are being disrupted by the ripple effect of disappearing jobs. Workers themselves are not just worried, they're frustrated. Many built their careers here, learned the craft, and counted on the stability. Now they face an uncertain future, with only the company's promise of support and transition programs. Unifor, the union representing these workers, has stepped in, pledging to fight for their jobs and push for alternatives. But the issue goes beyond economics. It's about pride, community, and identity, and a growing sense that Ottawa has once again let them down. Amherstburg's closure is more than a local story. It highlights a national problem. When Canadian jobs can be moved across the border so easily, communities are left to pick up the pieces. For towns that have long relied on manufacturing, it's a stark reminder that in today's economy, no job is untouchable.
Frank with you, I was pissed off. I made it clear to the company that they have a fight on their hands.
Shock and sadness in Amherstburg. The Crown Royal bottling facility is closing, yet the company says they aren't leaving Canada. Good evening and thank you for joining us on TV and on radio tonight. News today, Amherstburg's largest employer is shutting down. Diageo has announced it will close its Crown Royal bottling plant in the town, a facility that has anchored that community for nearly a century, putting about 160 people out of work. Let's go straight to CTV's Sanjay Maru, who joins me in the newsroom tonight with the latest on this. And Sanjay, how did workers find out about all of this?
Well, Stephanie, we watched workers leaving the plant this morning, some in tears following an emergency meeting called around 9:30. They all declined to speak with media, saying they had been directed to not comment. Tonight, their union, however, says they are preparing for a fight while the town officials measure what this means for the future of Amherstburg.
The Amherstburg closure isn't happening in isolation. Canada's manufacturing sector is already under pressure, and ongoing trade tensions with the United States have only made things harder. U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods have created a powerful incentive for companies to move operations south, where costs are lower and rules are more favorable. For Diageo, shifting part of their bottling to the U.S. might make perfect sense for the bottom line. But for Canada, it's a clear warning sign. The numbers already show the impact. Canada's jobless rate has been creeping upward in recent months, and every closure like Amherstburg adds more uncertainty for workers and the towns that depend on them. This isn't just an isolated problem. Other Canadian communities have already felt the same pain. From automotive parts to food processing, each time a facility shuts its doors, it's not only jobs that disappear, it's also the small businesses, the relationships, and the local services that rely on those paychecks to survive. Meanwhile, Ottawa has mostly remained on the sidelines, watching as U.S. policies under Trump continue pulling companies south. Diageo isn't just Amherstburg's largest employer. It represents a much bigger story about where Canada's economy is headed.
Diageo is not just Amherstburg's largest employer. It represents far more to this shoreline town of about 25,000.
You have generations of families that have worked there. Amherstburg's wrapped their arms around that facility.
Inside, crews bottle and package Crown Royal, filling, capping, and case packing before finished cases ship to distributors in Canada and the U.S. Come February, the doors are closing on this nearly 100-year-old facility, putting 160 people out of a job.
To be quite frank with you, I was pissed off. I made it clear to the company that they have a fight on their hands, because it was basically reading me a letter with no details, just saying it was a business decision.
In a statement, the company says it's part of a plan to streamline its North American supply chain, shifting some bottling closer to U.S. consumers, while Crown Royal's mashing, distilling, and aging remain in Canada. For this community, the shutdown raises difficult questions about what Amherstburg looks like without its largest employer.
American incentives, tax breaks, and a friendlier manufacturing environment are reshaping the North American economic landscape. Critics argue that Mark Carney and federal leadership have been slow and ineffective in responding. When companies can so easily move critical operations across the border, workers and communities are left exposed, while Ottawa struggles to keep up. When the tariff dispute first broke out, Canada had an opportunity to set the tone. It could have shown strength, taken a firm stance, and proven to investors that Ottawa knew how to defend its industries. Instead, Carney leaned on bankers' language, hedging, delaying, and trying to please everyone at once. The result wasn't compromise, it was confusion. Washington pushed harder, and Canada appeared weaker. That moment did more than hurt trade talks. It damaged Canada's image abroad. Investors don't just study numbers, They pay close attention to how leaders handle pressure. When Carney hesitated, he signaled uncertainty, suggesting to the world that Canada might not be a safe bet anymore. Strong negotiators project stability and attract capital. Under Carney's leadership, Canada is projecting doubt. The political backlash was swift. Ontario Premier Doug Ford quickly blasted the closure, calling it a betrayal of Canadian workers. He pointed out that Amherstburg isn't just losing paychecks, it's losing stability. And he warned that unless Ottawa shows real leadership, other communities could face the same fate. His message was blunt. Protecting Canadian jobs must come first. But in Ottawa, the response hasn't been reassuring. Carney has struggled to get ahead of the story. Instead of presenting a clear plan to keep jobs in Canada, he has leaned on familiar talking points about supply chain adjustments and long-term resiliency. For workers staring at unemployment, that kind of language feels hollow. They don't need lectures on economic theory. They need guarantees that companies won't abandon their communities. They're asking why investment is leaving Canada and why it's so much easier for companies to shift operations south. Carney has never provided a real answer. The contrast with the United States makes it even starker. South of the border, Trump's policies are actively pulling investment back into American manufacturing. Tax incentives, targeted tariffs, and measures to hold companies accountable have made the U.S. a more attractive place to do business. Diageo's decision reflects that reality. While Canada debates and delays, the U.S. is already reaping the benefits. And for many Canadians, it feels like their leaders are still pretending the playing field is level, when in reality, it's anything but.